I often get asked, would I fail the driving test for going just 1 mile per hour over the speed limit? Or how much over the speed limit do I need to be before I'd fail the test? Well, there's no set number, but I have been a driving instructor in Great Britain for over 15 years now, and I've sat in on many driving tests, and I have a good idea of how much over the speed limit a driver needs to go before an examiner will mark the use of speed box. Also, I've spoken to a driving examiner all about this. So in this video, I'm going to help you understand how much over the limit you need to be before you start getting driving faults on your driving test in Great Britain. Firstly, the driving examiner told me that if a driver does 40 miles an hour in a 30, that's a fail. Definite fail, that's what he said, no chance. But what if you're going 1 mile per hour over the speed limit? Well, the examiner told me that is still speeding, but it's very unlikely that's going to lead to a driving test fail. It's possible you could get a minor mark for consistently doing 31 in a 30, but that's also not very likely because the driving test is only 40 minutes long and you're on roads where you're dealing with lots of hazards, parked cars, pedestrian crossings, junctions, so you're not really able to do 31 for long enough to be likely to get a minor mark. Also, it's even less likely, therefore, that you can accumulate enough minors throughout the test for it to become a fail. Because if you get too many minors in the same area, those minors do turn into a serious, and that is a fail. What about 32 in a 30? That's 2 miles per hour over the speed limit now. Well, when a driving examiner is deciding whether or not to give you a driving fault for going over the speed limit, they're thinking about how much did you go over the speed limit by and for how long. The more you go over the speed limit by, the less time they're going to wait before they give you that minor mark. And if you can get those minor marks in less time, over the course of a 40-minute test, you're able to accumulate more minors and therefore you're more likely going to get a serious mark from an accumulation of minors. However, if you were to do 32 on a whole stretch of 30 road, that's unlikely to be a serious. It is likely to be a minor mark, and if you are to fail for going 32 in a 30, it's most likely because you've been doing it consistently through the test and you have accumulated enough minor marks for doing so. Also, if you were to do 32 and then bring it back down to 30 again after a short period of time, that is also still unlikely to be marked. What about 33 miles an hour in a 30? That's 3 miles an hour over the speed limit now. Well, they're going to wait even less time before they give you a minor mark. If you're accelerating up to 30 and you accidentally go over and get to 33 and bring it down quickly, again, that's still unlikely to be marked, but you better bring it down quick because in my experience, when you're doing 3 miles per hour over the speed limit, examiners tend not to wait too long before you get a minor mark. It's still unlikely to be a serious in itself. If you did a stretch of road at 33 when it's a 30, it could be a serious, but it's not very likely. Depends how long that stretch is. But it's much more likely you're going to accumulate enough minors to fail because you'll be getting those minors quite quickly if you're doing 33 in a 30. Now for 34 in a 30, that's 4 miles per hour over the speed limit. And in my experience, this is the magic number. This is where examiners give minors very quickly. If you accelerate up to 34 and bring it back down to 30, it's not a given that you would get a minor for that, but it's quite likely. If you stayed at 34 for very long, it would likely become a serious mark. And if you continue to stay at that speed, the examiner is likely to say something because they don't want you doing 34 in the 30. So what they'll probably say is, the speed limit's 30 here, can you please bring your speed down and stay within the speed limit? At which point, if they've done that, you know you've got a serious mark and therefore you have failed the driving test. There is a situation where I find driving examiners can be a bit more lenient when it comes to how much you can go over the speed limit by before you get a driving fault, but it is only for a very short period of time. Let's say you're on a 60 mile per hour road and up ahead you can see 30 signs. It's going to be a 30 mile per hour speed limit soon. You start slowing down, but as you pass the sign, you've misjudged your slowing down a little bit and you're still doing, let's say, 38 miles an hour. But you continue to slow down and you reach 30 very shortly after passing the sign. In that situation, in my experience, you're more likely to get away with a minor even though you're doing 8 miles per hour over the speed limit there. It's not a given, and it depends how late you are, how long it takes you to get to 30 miles per hour. If you pass that sign at 45 miles an hour, in my experience, you failed the driving test. They're more likely to fail you if you think the speed limit is different to what it actually is than if you misjudge your slowing down slightly to be on target for the sign. They're more lenient if they think, oh, it's just a bit of an error in how much you're slowing down there, as opposed to you think, oh, I can pass the sign and then slow down to 30. If you think that, then you most likely will fail. And that's the same for accelerating. If you can see a 60 or a national speed limit sign up ahead and you're in a 30 and you start accelerating because you see the sign, you think, well, I see the sign now I can go 60, then yeah. If you go enough above the speed limit in that situation, you most likely will fail, because that's a lack of understanding. You have to pass that sign before it is the highest speed limit. If you started accelerating a whisker before the sign, then yes, you probably would get away with it. But my advice is, if you see a lower speed limit, make sure you get your speed down before you pass the sign. And if you see a higher speed limit up ahead, don't go above the current speed limit until you have passed the signs of the higher speed limit. I also find examiners can be more lenient if you go over the speed limit slightly due to a hill. Let's say you're on a 30 road and it starts to go downhill, the speed starts to come up a bit, but you see that, you use the brake, you slow it down, you didn't go over the speed limit by much or for long. In my experience, you're probably going to get away with that without a mark. They understand you're not a seasoned driver. And a big difference between new drivers and seasoned drivers is seasoned drivers are more used to hills, they prepare for hills earlier, whereas newer drivers tend to feel the hill affect the car first and then react and sort it out. As long as you don't go over the speed limit by much or for long, you probably get away with it. I was told by an examiner that they go by the speed on the Speedo during the driving test, not the GPS speed. You may already be aware, but most cars, the Speedo overreads slightly. So if your Speedo is showing 30 miles per hour, you actually probably have a true speed of closer to 28 miles an hour, although it does vary from car to car. Some are a bit more, some are a bit less. Now, the reason why they go by the Speedo is because, well, it's too complicated not to. The examiners would have to figure out the true speed of all the cars that go to test, which are many. And also it opens up the door for someone to lie or argue if they fail for going over the speed limit. They could say, no, I wasn't speeding there. My Speedo overreads by 5 miles per hour at that speed, and the examiner would have to take their word for it. So instead, what they do is they go by the Speedo speed during the driving test. Now, I know I focused on 30 mile per hour speed limits during this video, but that's because that's where I have experience of seeing someone get driver faults for going above the speed limit. I can't recall a time where I've seen someone get a driving fault for breaking the speed limit in a 40, 50, 60 or 70 mile per hour road. And that's because during the driving test, drivers are usually very careful, but going above a 30 mile per hour speed limit is very easy, so that still does happen during the test. So I've shared with you my experience of how driving examiners actually mark someone breaking the speed limit in a 30 zone. I haven't seen it happen in 40 plus mile per hour speed limits, and driving examiners are usually very vague if I ask them, well, how much would someone have to go over the speed limit by before you'd give them a serious? They're usually quite vague, and that's because they like to stick with their, okay, it was how much by and for how long, and they like to make their own decision. But I would assume, and this is an assumption, this is a guess, that for the higher speed limits, it's going to be a similar margin for what it is at 30 from what I've seen actually happen over 15 years. Well, I hope this video helps you feel more at ease if you're on your driving test and you look down and you see you're doing 31 or 32 on a 30 road. It's not over yet. If you get it sorted soon and it hasn't been over the limit for very long, chances are you're not even going to be marked down for it. And there's no need to aim for 28 miles per hour on a 30 road. Try to make the full use of the 30 limit when it's safe to do so. If you don't, if you keep going slow, well, it's possible you could get marked down for going too slow, but that's a subject for a different video. Well, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're looking for car insurance, check out the links to Collingwood and Confused in the description. If you're learning to drive and want to insure yourself on somebody else's car, then Collingwood are there for you, because you can do so without affecting the owner's policy, and that takes away a big stress from the owner of that car that you're using to practice your driving in. And via the link at the moment, there's up to 35% off and a £20 Amazon gift card. If you want to insure your own car, I recommend checking out the link to confused.com, because you fill out one quote form and get loads of quotes back from many insurers to compare who's cheapest, and you can change the car on that quote as many times as you like without having to do the whole quote again. So it's a quick and easy way to compare how much it costs to insure different cars. Using the links doesn't cost you anything, but it does support the channel, so thank you very much. Subscribe to get my future videos, and until the next one, cheerio.